The habit. I got involved in an extramarital relationship. I strayed from my husband 3 times with the same person until we eventually got exposed. Not by my husband, thankfully. That would have been even more heartbreaking for him. Regardless, this exposure ultimately led to the end of our marriage, though thankfully, he never had to witness anything firsthand. A colleague who envied our professional achievements discovered our secret and quickly shared it, taking pleasure in knocking us down a peg or two. It wasn't a situation I actively sought out. Through therapy, I've come to realize that nothing in life just happens. Every day is filled with choices that shape our future. My therapist helped me see that every decision is a choice, whether we acknowledge it at the moment or not. So, yes, I became involved with someone else. I can't excuse it by saying I wasn't in my right mind. The first time it happened, I had barely consumed any alcohol. He was attractive, and we had shared harmless flirtations for months. Working closely together, we developed a camaraderie, often referring to each other as work spouses, which was a joke we shared openly, even with our partners. During a social gathering, my husband jokingly passed on the financial burden of my shopping habits to my work husband, and his wife jokingly handed off the task of training him on household etiquette. We all enjoyed the humor and camaraderie of the moment, discussing how much we should all spend more time together. I won't delve into superficial details about appearances. We were both young, fit, and reasonably attractive, and I'll leave it at that. There's no need to recount any intimate details. We were all in our late 20s, with my husband being the oldest at 30. Professionally, I secured a great job right after college and climbed the ranks. The elderly owner of the company often complimented my work, saying I was like the daughter he never had. My role as a team leader meant occasional overnight trips, which I disliked, but my husband reassured me it was fine. Initially, these separations led to passionate reunions, but over time, that excitement faded. Our connection wasn't fading. We were youthful, reveling in our affection frequently each week. Even during hectic times, we managed at least a weekly connection, eagerly making up for lost time whenever possible. Our relationship evolved from dating for 8 months to living together for nearly a year, culminating in marriage, which lasted for 3.5 years. The situation escalated after a series of intense meetings. The tension was palpable. Over dinner and wine, we reminisced about our spouses and shared future plans, highlighting how in stressful times, being with our partners was our solace. Amidst this, a remark sparked a mutual understanding about the need for closeness in times of stress, though who initiated it remains blurred in my memory. Subtle flirting and light touches ensued, with jokes about compensating for our spouse's absence. His charm and eloquence were undeniable, traits that made him a key player on our team. Despite the escalating flirtation, the night ended with us retiring to our separate rooms. Alone in bed, my thoughts wandered to him, fueling my imagination until he appeared at my door, wine in hand. Our restraint faltered, leading to a passionate encounter that ended only in the early morning hours, leaving me to a sleep of exhaustion and escape. Awakening later, reality hit hard. The guilt of betrayal was suffocating. The attempt to cleanse myself of the incident during a prolonged shower was futile. Our interactions the next day were strained, marked by avoidance and a shared inefficiency. The tension persisted until a private conversation occurred weeks later, where mutual apologies were exchanged and a pact of secrecy was made. This facade of normalcy lasted 6 months. My inner turmoil was somewhat noticeable, prompting concern from my husband. His offer to seek support from my colleague, under the guise of work-related stress, was ironically compassionate. The narrative took another turn during a Christmas blizzard, with my husband suggesting companionship with my colleague, while he planned an outing with the colleague's wife. Sensing my disappointment, he offered to cancel, illustrating the complexities of our intertwined relationships. I had regained my composure enough to assure him it was all right, but I playfully insisted he owed me an impressive surprise for the next Christmas. He agreed, hinting that he already had something in mind. X and I shared our grievances, with him expressing frustration over how much his wife admired my husband. "It's constant," he grumbled. "Look at how thoughtful he is. Being treated like royalty must be nice. Did I mention the delicate necklace he got her? Just saw it and thought it would look stunning on her." I found myself absent-mindedly touching the necklace, a smile spreading across my face as I remembered the happiness it brought me. It was an unexpected gift, not for a birthday or holiday, just a spontaneous "your neck is beautiful and deserves this. It will accentuate your elegance." My husband wasn't without his faults, which sometimes irritated me immensely. Yet, observing other couples in our circle, where the women were envious, and the men were either impressed or annoyed by his high standards, I would just smile and cling to him a bit closer. The result of our get-together was a prolonged and carefree time that lasted a couple of days. We were still enjoying our time together when the hotel informed us that we could now leave for the airport. After sharing a shower, we sat close on the plane, reflecting on our experience and promising that it was a one-time event. However, 4 months later, our secret was out. I'm sure you're curious, but it was simply a passionate encounter between 2 consenting adults. Was it fulfilling? Yes. But was it worth the consequences? No. The aftermath was severe. My boss, visibly upset, called us in separately. He was disappointed, having held my marriage and professional conduct in high regard, likening it to the early days of his own. I was still married, I confirmed, despite not having seen my husband for a fortnight. While I kept my job, my role was diminished, no more leadership or public representation for the company. I anticipated the eventual need to seek new employment and hoped for a positive reference. X exited the company discreetly, securing a neutral reference. However, I sensed that any potential employer informed by my boss's network might receive a cautionary hint. A conversation could have led to mutual apologies, but our boss and spouses intervened. My husband, typically calm, sternly warned X of dire consequences, prompting X to vanish after his divorce was finalized. He left behind a heartbroken wife and their young son, who was only 5 at the time. It seemed to take her an eternity to find her footing again. After 8 long years, she eventually remarried, choosing an older man who showers her and her son with affection. This man, touched by the boy's request, legally adopted him, giving him his last name, despite the boy initially just asking for a car on his 16th birthday. The boy's biological father never reappeared, even though his ex-wife tried to reach out to inform him of their divorce and his son's continued existence. My life felt like it was split into different chapters, before the affair and after the affair. The BTA period was filled with joy and brightness, whereas Auto was overshadowed with gloom and sorrow. Thankfully, the Auto phase didn't last as long as the BTA. Choosing sides became inevitable. Our once close-knit group of friends started to fracture, leading to awkward social gatherings. The easygoing banter and playful teasing vanished, replaced by a cautious distance to prevent reopening old wounds. Eventually, relocating seemed like a mutual relief for everyone involved. The women in our group were kind, yet cautious, offering empathy but maintaining a distance to protect their marriages. In contrast, the men supported me but kept a clear boundary to avoid any inappropriate situations. The support mainly flowed towards my husband and his affair partner, as they were viewed as the victims of the situation. Then came the phase of confessing to our families and friends, which brought disappointment but also forgiveness, although my marriage couldn't be salvaged. I continued to exchange holiday greetings and birthday gifts with my ex-husband's parents, maintaining a cordial relationship without revisiting the past in person. The most significant impact of the Auto phase was on our intimate life. Our previous spontaneous and passionate encounters became a source of anxiety and missteps, leading to an emotionally charged and unsuccessful attempt at rekindling our physical connection. Both of us were haunted by insecurities and the fear of inadequacy, resulting in a strained attempt to navigate our changed relationship. As time went on, things improved, at least to some extent. We made efforts to connect emotionally and physically, but I could feel him becoming distant. Initially, I was understanding, but eventually, I started to feel frustrated. Didn't he realize how much effort I was putting in? How deeply I cared for him? Counseling seemed to help, but it mostly illuminated the fact that our relationship had reached its end. I had broken his trust, and despite my best efforts to repair the damage, the rift between us was too profound. By the time 1.5 years after the announcement rolled around, our relationship had officially ended. The divorce process was straightforward, split evenly, without much conflict. I remained composed, even when the divorce was finalized. In our small town, our paths would cross occasionally. We always exchanged polite greetings, but nothing more. However, by the 4th year Auto, seeing him with another woman in a cafe, sharing tender moments, truly broke my heart. That night, I allowed myself one last bout of tears. Determined to start anew, I sent out job applications everywhere and eventually received an offer from a firm 2 states away. It was a significant career move and exactly what I needed. After bidding farewell to my remaining friends and family, I embarked on a new chapter of my life. Update: entering the phase after my divorce, I reflected on my sessions with a counselor. She aided me not through sympathy or blame, but by listening. In one memorable session, she revealed a large scar on her hip, a result of a youthful misadventure involving alcohol and a dare gone wrong. This scar, she explained, was a lifelong reminder of her choices, much like the emotional scars I bore from my infidelity. She made it clear that my actions were not spontaneous but a series of decisions, each one easier after the last, until I was eventually caught. This was a lesson in accountability and the lasting impact of our choices. After the divorce, learning my ex-husband had moved on and started a new family, I attempted to date but found no meaningful connections. Eventually, I shifted my focus to self-improvement and community involvement. This led to new friendships and eventually a significant relationship with a fellow runner. However, this relationship ended due to my past infidelities, reinforcing the idea that some mistakes are hard to overcome. Despite this, I learned that forgiveness is possible and found a new partner who accepted my past. Our first encounter was a clumsy yet serendipitous meeting at a race, leading to a humorous and promising start to our relationship. He handed me a card from his gym bag. "Call me to set a time. It's a fancy place, so dress nicely." I struggled to speak as he gently touched my face and kissed my cheek before leaving. My friends teased, "That was quick." If I knew that's all it took, I would have made my move earlier. Did you know he's one of the city's most eligible bachelors? The restaurant was impressive. He looked effortlessly sophisticated in his expensive attire, while I wore my best dress, altered to perfection with my sewing skills. The evening was delightful, leading to more dates over 8 months. I felt a deep attraction and joy I hadn't experienced in years. After a heartfelt conversation, he comforted me, understanding my past and willing to move forward together. He presented a document, assuring his commitment, and then a ring, symbolizing our new beginning. I signed the document, agreeing to be a devoted partner. Emotionally, I accepted the ring, embracing our future together. Years later, at a reunion, I conversed amicably with my ex and his wife. Time had healed old wounds, allowing for forgiveness and shared updates about our families, proving that it's possible to move past old mistakes and find happiness. Here's the moral of the tale: even the best of us can make foolish mistakes. These errors, unintended and perhaps undiscovered, will haunt them forever. A persistent whisper in their minds might torment them with thoughts of being exposed. I was complacent, convinced that if my missteps were revealed, I would be forgiven. The outcome clearly didn't align with my expectations. I keep a vigilant eye on my daughters, and when they're mature enough, I plan to share my history with them, hoping they'll learn and forgive. I want to teach them about the lasting marks our choices can leave. That's the crux of it. My therapist was spot on. It's relieving to share this burden. Thank you for taking the time to read this. If my story helps you avoid a catastrophic mistake, then that's a win. If not, the responsibility lies with you. Before you act, consider if you can bear the weight of the consequences. My comment: she changes and find a new love. But I wager if she could go back and do it all over, she would leap at the chance. Her first husband was her real love that she took for granted. Story 2. Winner is loser and loser is winner. The opening of deer hunting season in Pennsylvania is almost like a state holiday, especially in the rural parts. Schools often close on the first day of the 2-week rifle season, not just because of the tradition, but because so many students and staff would rather be in the woods hunting. Eventually, it just made sense to shut the schools on that Monday after Thanksgiving, avoiding the hassle of dealing with numerous absences. I was part of a hunting club with around 400 acres of land, a legacy from our ancestors who established it back in 1952. The club started with 4 founders and now had 14 members, mostly their descendants. Our modest cabin stood at the heart of the property, stocked with beer, snacks, and lively conversations. Around noon, I was enjoying the peace of the forest when a gunshot echoed. It came from the hunting stand my brother had set up for his son, Tom, who was 14. When I got there, Tom was looking down at a deer he had shot. Unfortunately, it was a doe, and he only had a license for buck hunting. I was frustrated with my brother for not supervising Tom more closely. Tom, clearly anxious, asked me what he should do, thinking he had seen antlers on the deer. I knew it wasn't my place to discipline him. My responsibility was to handle the situation with as little fallout as possible. While I dressed the deer, I lectured him on the importance of clearly identifying the target before shooting, emphasizing the gravity of taking a life and the need for responsible hunting. We hauled the deer back and hid it, then went to the cabin where we met Chuck Tracy having coffee. I mentioned to Chuck that Tom had mistakenly shot a doe without a tag, hinting whether he could help. Chuck, half joking, commented on Tom's need for caution and declined to use his tag on this doe. Before I could manage the situation further, Tom blurted out where we had hidden the deer, a slip that compounded our problem. Just as I was about to consult with the others about the doe, a stern knock interrupted us. Opening the door, I found Sam Watson, the local game warden, standing outside. Trying to keep the atmosphere light, I welcomed him in for some coffee. From an early age, my father instilled in me a cautious respect for game wardens. He advised me to be wary, yet not intimidated, and to keep my lips sealed. He believed they couldn't pin anything on someone who didn't spill the beans. When Tom glanced at me, I subtly shook my head to signal caution. Sam entered and surveyed the room. He was familiar with me enough to know pinning any misdeed on me would be a tall order. Yet, he was aware that others present might not hold up as well under scrutiny. Then, his gaze landed on the stains on my boots. "Notice the stains on your boots, Paul. Had a bit of luck today?" Sam inquired. I had to feign ignorance. "Oh, just a minor nosebleed earlier," I said with a smirk. Sam retorted, "If those stains turn out to be from deer, you're going to regret not being forthcoming." I laughed off his threat. "Sure, Sam, as if you've got a forensic lab in your vehicle. I suppose next you'll star in a TV show about hunting investigations. Even if you could prove the stains were from deer, which they aren't, it wouldn't mean much. I'm not aware of any laws against having deer stains, but feel free to enlighten me." Sam dropped the topic of my boots, knowing well that the authorities didn't conduct detailed forensic tests. He shifted to small talk, trying to ease the tension before subtly probing for information, especially about any recent hunting activities. When he turned his attention to Tom, asking if he had taken any shots, I quickly intervened. The boy only caught a chill. I hoped Tom would pick up on how to handle the warden's questioning. Sam acknowledged my intervention with a nod, then turned his attention to Chuck with a sly grin. "Keeping out of trouble, Chuck," he teased. Would hate to find you again. Make sure you're all following the rules. It's tough when I have to issue citations for any discrepancies, especially given how tight the last fine made your budget. Nothing hidden away, right? Watching Chuck's nervous reaction, his face twitching, I sensed trouble. He had been fined previously for having a loaded gun in his vehicle, a mistake costing him a fair amount. I felt compelled to deflect attention from Chuck and prevent him from inadvertently implicating Tom. Not me, Sam, Chuck said anxiously. If you find anything, I swear it wasn't me. Sam, experienced in these matters, sensed Chuck's desperation, akin to a predator detecting a vulnerable prey. It seems like you might have stretched the rules a bit too far, Sam remarked. A thorough look around here might just confirm that. Go ahead and search, Sam, I interjected. You don't even need a warrant. Let's wrap this up quickly, we still have a big buck to catch. Sam gave me a knowing look, recognizing the fragile spot in our defense, and decided to press harder. All right, Chuck, I'll take a look. But if I find something, it's you who will bear the consequences. It's clear you have a knack for bending the rules, and it won't take long for that to catch up with you. It was the boy, Chuck blurted out. He took a doe without a tag and hid it by that tree near the cabin. Jack Hook, another club member, was taken aback by the revelation, recognizing Chuck's cowardly behavior. Standing in silence until now, waiting for the inspection to end, he couldn't hide his disdain for Chuck's actions, a sentiment I shared. Sam, taken aback, looked disappointed. He was just doing his duty, not expecting to uncover a novice's mistake. He hesitated, then said, let's check on that doe. I need to see your license, young man, his tone reflecting regret. This will be a costly mistake for you. I stepped in to protect my nephew, whose father was still hunting. The responsibility was mine, and I was ready to face it. Sam, it was me who shot the doe. Chuck is mistaken, I firmly stated. Sam, seasoned in these affairs, nodded. Okay, Paul, if you're confessing, I'll process this and that will be the end of it, he said, acknowledging the situation. He knew I was being untruthful. It was clear to everyone, especially Sam, that no one was deceived. This was simply how things worked. He had caught an unlawfully taken deer and an admission of guilt. He didn't want to blame Tom, and I was internally grateful to him for his integrity. He was merely performing his duties, ensuring that the hunting regulations were followed, while Chuck remained tight-lipped. Sam left with the deer, taking my check for the game commission, totaling $220. Fuming, I stormed off into the forest, deliberately leaving my rifle behind, fearing I might confront Chuck with more than words if I returned to the cabin. I didn't go back to camp until nightfall, having managed to calm down by then. Back at the cabin, Jack was warming up some chili, and the others were relaxing with beers, awaiting dinner. Tom and his father were absent. Jack noticed my puzzled look. Lou took Tom back so he could attend school tomorrow. Lou was fuming when he found out Tom had taken a doe and that Chuck had disclosed it to the game warden, Jack explained. Lou's insisting on a meeting upon his return, demanding that Chuck be expelled from the club. Chuck, meanwhile, was scouring the club's rules and records, searching for any clause that could save his membership. After we ate and cleaned up, Lou arrived and immediately called for an urgent meeting. Without wasting time on formalities, he got straight to the point. Our foremost rule here is that no one should inform the game warden about a fellow member or guest's actions. But this individual betrayed that trust. I propose we remove him from the club, Lou stated emphatically. The motion was swiftly seconded and passed with unanimous agreement, Chuck wisely choosing not to vote. Then, he revealed his surprise. The bylaws offer me an alternative, which I choose to exercise, he declared. Good heavens, lad, exclaimed Bill Taylor, astonished. That rule was a mere jest we concocted during a drunken night long ago. We were all bewildered, so Bill set aside his beer and stepped forward to explain. I was much younger then. Stan Gillow had been lamenting his costly divorce for days. During our traditional last night meeting of the season, Stan, half in jest, suggested that to avoid expulsion for informing, one could offer the services of his wife to the aggrieved party for a year. Amidst laughter and drinks, the motion was unexpectedly passed, Bill reminisced. And now, this cunning man has dug up that absurd rule, hoping to exploit it. Everyone was shocked. The idea of a man using his wife to escape consequences was deeply distasteful. The atmosphere was charged with disapproval. I noticed Lou's face flush with anger, a clear sign he was about to lose his temper. I had little regard for Chuck, yet I wanted to prevent Lou, my brother, from landing in jail over this. I've got it handled, I announced. Since I'm already divorced, I don't need to justify myself to a spouse. I'll step in for Chuck's responsibilities this year. Facing Chuck, I could see he barely registered the gravity of the situation, which made me question his judgment. We'll arrange specific times for her assistance, 2 days a week. She needs to comply fully, or you're out of our group, I stated firmly. Do we have an agreement, Chuck? That seems reasonable, he replied nonchalantly. I maintain my membership and privileges as long as I uphold my part, correct? Lou was furious. You've really crossed the line this time. Chuck seemed unfazed as he casually drank his beer, while Lou walked away in disbelief. This was an unheard of scenario in our hunting circle, with Chuck trading his wife's time for club membership. And then it hit me, I had never actually met Chuck's wife. Anxiety crept in as I imagined what she might look like. The following day, I sought information about her. Old Bill offered some insights. "She's actually not that bad," he remarked. "A bit on the slim side and reserved. Perhaps that's why they don't have children. She's quite younger than Chuck." With a plan in mind, I called Chuck's number the first Wednesday after deer season, ensuring he wouldn't be home. A woman's voice answered. "Paul Jensen here," I said. "Did Chuck mention I'd be calling?" A hesitant yes came from her end. "You're aware of why I'm calling and what this entails," I continued. "Are you okay with covering Chuck's expenses?" "I wouldn't say I'm okay with it, Mr. Jensen, but I've accepted it." "Is that sufficient?" she queried. "That will do," I responded. "I'll pick you up at 7. Please dress smartly. I want Chuck to see us when we depart. I assure you, you'll be home early." After hanging up, I pondered, who was the lesser man, Chuck or myself? We were peers, sharing the same classroom 3 decades ago. His wife must be nearing 40, judging by Bill's guess. At 7 precisely, I rang their doorbell. Chuck greeted me with an unexpected smile, inviting me inside. I had envisioned him feeling regretful and upset, yet there he stood, content. This baffled me. "Millie, your companion has arrived. Care for a drink while you wait, Paul?" he offered. I declined, still trying to piece together the situation. Why wasn't he embarrassed or upset? Apprehension filled me as I anticipated meeting his wife. What error had I committed? Then she appeared, and my anxiety eased. She matched Bill's description, petite, slender, and fair, dressed modestly in a long, high-necked outfit, her dark hair neatly gathered. Her attire gave nothing away, and while she wasn't stunning, she wasn't unattractive either. "Hello, Mr. Jensen. I'm Millie," she greeted, with evident redness in her eyes from tears. The idea of penalizing Chuck suddenly felt wrong. He seemed oblivious to shame, but his wife felt it deeply. My disdain for Chuck quickly turned into self-reproach. "Take your time tonight," Chuck said with a grin. "I'll keep the light on for you." Millie winced at his nonchalant demeanor. Fearing she might break down again, I swiftly took her hand and led her to my car, eager to distance her from Chuck's unsettling presence. Millie gave me a curious glance as I opened the car door for her. Once I settled into the driver's seat, I mulled over my initial plan, which had been to take her to my place and make a statement to Chuck through her. I had thought it would embarrass a typical husband, but Chuck seemed anything but typical. With Millie now in my car, I needed a new plan. We drove in silence until I decided on a restaurant. The atmosphere in the car was tense, neither of us knowing how to break the ice. As we parked, Millie's look conveyed a mix of emotions, leaving me guessing her thoughts. Without a reservation, a bit of tipping ensured we got a table quickly. I escorted Millie to her seat, and as we sat across from each other, the air was filled with the need to find common ground for conversation. Millie broke the silence, asserting her independence and challenging the way I perceived her. Her words struck a chord, and I saw a tear roll down her cheek, making me feel remorseful. "Millie, please don't be upset," I implored. "I didn't mean to make you feel disrespected. Let's just have a pleasant dinner and forget about everything else." Millie, still emotional, expressed her concerns about how I might perceive her. I was taken aback by her inference, assuring her that her company was not a source of embarrassment to me and that I was sincerely trying to make her feel comfortable. Millie's predicament became clear to me. She was caught in a bind, feeling judged regardless of the outcome. I realized the complexity of her situation and reflected on my own intention, influenced by my past experiences and the grudge against Chuck. The situation had escalated beyond a simple vendetta. It was now a tangled web of pride, perception, and misunderstood intentions. As I navigated through these thoughts, I understood the bigger picture and the needless complexity of seeking revenge through personal relationships. The waiter arrived, and we placed our drink orders. I realized I had a year to decide whether to pursue a relationship with Millie. There was no rush. As we dined, we stumbled upon several topics of mutual interest and enjoyed engaging conversation. Millie seemed to unwind, offering smiles throughout the evening. "This is my first time dining out here, Mr. Jensen," she shared. "Chuck prefers home-cooked meals, but I must say, the food is delightful and the ambience is charming." "Please, call me Paul," I corrected. "Mr. Jensen makes me feel ancient." "That was my father's title." "Sure, Paul," she replied with a grin. "You don't appear old at all. Chuck mentioned you were schoolmates, but you seem much younger. And you're divorced, right?" "Indeed," I replied playfully. "I wouldn't be in this situation otherwise. Not many married men would find themselves here." That comment seemed to upset Millie, her face turning a shade of red as she glanced away. I silently blamed Chuck for putting her in this awkward spot, yet I couldn't ignore my own role in this unfortunate scenario. I had been pondering my life's narrative, influenced by my fondness for Shakespeare since high school. I resolved to be the protagonist in my own story, to take Millie home and end this bizarre chapter. There was no reason to continue when I had the freedom to meet others without such complications. If Chuck was truly concerned, he'd be anxiously waiting, probably regretting his actions deeply. After settling the bill, we headed to my car. I held the door open for Millie, then got in to drive her home. "Paul, your manners are impeccable," she complimented. "You've been so considerate tonight, courtesy I'm not used to." Thank you for treating me respectfully. It's my mother's training, I confessed. Being a gentleman around women became second nature, and to honor her teachings, I'll take you home without further ado. Agreeing to Chuck's idea was a mistake on my part. Paul, you're too kind to him, Millie burst out. He's the one who created this mess. You have every right to settle things your way. Thanks, Millie, but this situation feels a bit too strange for me to be at ease. It's not that I have anything against you. Actually, you've been quite enjoyable company this evening. Seeking revenge isn't something I admire, and causing you pain just to settle a score with Chuck seems wrong. So, you're going to drop me off and then just disappear? She inquired. Doesn't do much for my self-esteem, Paul. Millie's remark made me laugh. She had a sharp sense of humor. You think I'm joking, right? She said with a hint of sadness. If I go back and tell Chuck that we just had dinner and nothing else, he'll be upset. He was under the impression that you had more intense plans for the evening. He even said I'd be fortunate to be able to stand afterward. I observed Millie, trying to gauge her sincerity. Was she serious, or was this another attempt at humor? Why would Chuck say such things to her? Her expression told me she wasn't joking. What was Chuck's angle here? Millie, I can't see him being upset that his wife had a respectful evening out, I said with a light-hearted laugh. He'd probably be relieved, to be honest. We were not far from her place when, to my utter astonishment, Millie made a bold move. This unexpected gesture took me by surprise, and I quickly reminded her, Millie, I'm taking you home. There's no need for any of this. She paused briefly. Paul, you don't get it. I feel like I need to do this. Let's just go with the flow. After a moment, I found a safe spot to pull over, trying to process what had just happened. It had been quite some time since I had been intimate, and the sudden turn of events caught me off guard. That was unexpected, Millie said with a mischievous smile, tidying up a bit. Now we can head to my place. What was all that about, Millie? I asked, perplexed. I mean, I'm not upset, but I told you that you weren't bound by any ridiculous pact. You didn't need to go through with that. There's something about Chuck you don't understand. He wants me to be with someone else, Millie disclosed. He struggles with his desires, and hearing about tonight might just spark something for him. I was against this plan initially, worried that either you wouldn't like me or I wouldn't be appealing to you. I merged back onto the highway, tuning into Millie's conversation. Tales like hers were not foreign to me, though I'd always doubted their validity. Did men actually crave such unusual experiences to feel desire? A thought struck me. Was I inadvertently aiding this man's satisfaction? Was I an unwitting participant in an odd game? Was it time to halt this abnormality? So you're saying Chuck wants you to be with another man, and this somehow excites him, gives him the ability to perform. He can't feel desire without these bizarre narratives. I questioned, astonished. He really wants you two to be intimate. It sounds terrible when you put it that way, but yes, that's the situation. He's struggled with this for years. He once found excitement in simple things, but over time, his need for stimulation grew. They even consulted a psychiatrist, Millie confided. The psychiatrist indicated it was more of a psychological issue than a physical one, yet nothing has helped Chuck so far, despite trying various treatments. When he returned from a trip and claimed I needed to be involved with you for a year, it surprisingly rekindled his passion. Initially, I thought it was just another one of his fantasies and went along with it. That night was passionate. So, he was actually content when I picked you up. Now you're going to share our encounter with him to help him feel desire. I probed in disbelief. Isn't he going to feel betrayed? I know I couldn't stand sharing my partner. It's hard to comprehend. The sense of disgrace somehow arouses him. He acknowledges its demeaning nature, but finds it thrilling, Millie explained. It's a paradoxical situation. Millie, I'm at a loss for words. Your company has been delightful, and you have an impressive talent, I remarked. Thanks, Millie smiled broadly. I had a feeling you'd appreciate it. Will you call me in a couple of days? I really enjoyed our time together, and I want to ensure Chuck's obligation is fulfilled. I regretted not being firmer, not just leaving her and ending it there. The recent memory of our encounter was too potent, too clear. My desires made the choice for me. Sure, Millie. How about Friday night at 7? I proposed. Can you make it then? We have a date. I know Chuck will be thrilled, and honestly, I'm looking forward to Friday as well, Millie said. It seems like a situation where everyone wins. I drove up to her house and got out to open her door for her. Will you come in and meet Chuck? Millie inquired. It would really excite him. I'm not sure this is a good idea, Millie. I feel a bit out of my comfort zone, so I think it's best to end the night here. You're quite the gentleman, Paul, remarked Chuck's wife with admiration. You've been so respectful and haven't even attempted to get too close. Millie moved closer, her expression inviting, reminding me of the nervous excitement of my first date, a stark contrast to the present moment. The next Friday, I found myself at Chuck's doorstep, ready for an evening out with his wife. He greeted me warmly, like an old buddy. Grab a beer, Paul, Chuck offered. Milla's just getting ready. She seemed quite taken with you the other night. At a loss for words, I simply nodded and took the beer, engaging in a brief chat about sports until Millie appeared. She was stunning in a short, elegantly cut dress. I was taken aback by her appearance, wondering if it was the dress or if I had misjudged her figure before. Paul, doesn't she look stunning? I bet you can't wait to spend the evening with her, Chuck commented playfully. Millie gave a shy smile at his words. I courteously helped her with her jacket, admiring how lovely she looked. Soon we were on our way. Paul, do you agree with Chuck? Are you going to find it difficult to keep your distance? Millie joked lightly. I gently placed my hand on her shoulder in a friendly gesture, respecting her space. Seems like you've decided to accept my company, Millie noted, smiling as she touched my hand lightly. I'm glad you're comfortable around me, Paul. Our evening consisted of a delightful dinner and a romantic comedy at a local theater, where we both had an enjoyable time. Paul, you're really something else, Millie remarked as we left the theater. Taking me out like this, you're very kind. Even though Chuck said it was okay, you treat me with such respect. I guess I'm just following my instincts on how to treat someone special, I responded with a smile. I had a great time with you tonight, Millie. You're wonderful company. You haven't even begun to discover the extent of my fun side, Millie said with a playful tone. Are you curious to know more, or are you just looking forward to another round of teasing? I must admit, the teasing is quite enjoyable, I responded with a smile. Did you mention our little adventure to Chuck? What was his reaction? He was visibly excited when I told him how you compared to him. I described how you playfully teased me, calling me all sorts of names while I was completely under your spell, Millie shared. Did you spice up the story a bit? Maybe you should consider storytelling, Millie, I suggested. You've got a knack for turning ordinary events into thrilling tales. Remember how you stopped the car in that secluded spot and asked for another round of playful teasing? I had no choice but to comply, fully engaging until you were satisfied. And this time, you added a new twist by playfully engaging with me more directly, Millie recounted with a laugh, casually adjusting her top. I parked the car and admired Millie's figure. Her features were genuinely attractive. I playfully interacted with her, noticing her response to my touch. She reciprocated, moving closer to me, making the atmosphere even more charged. There I was, in a shadowy parking spot, caught up in a secretive moment with a woman who wasn't mine, while ensuring our time was mutually thrilling. The idea of her sharing these tales, real or imagined, with her partner added another layer to the situation. How did I end up here? The following week brought the festive season, and I lost touch with Millie amidst the holiday bustle. I presumed she was similarly occupied. Come New Year's, Millie visited me, and the evening naturally progressed to more intimate moments. I ensured our time together was memorable. Afterward, as I drove her home, she expressed her gratitude repeatedly, hoping for another rendezvous. Driving back alone, I pondered over Millie sharing our private moments with her husband. The thought made me uneasy. The intimacy shared seemed too personal to be disclosed, even to her spouse. By the time I reached home, I felt troubled by the complexity of our arrangement. Sharing Millie with her husband made me question the dynamics of our interactions. Despite being the first in line, the satisfaction was fleeting. I resolved then to end things with Millie, seeking clarity and peace of mind. Just 2 weeks later, I found myself in a passionate embrace with Millie. Her breaths were quick and filled with excitement. Our moment of intensity came to a peak, and I lay beside her, catching my breath. She turned to me with a smile, saying, "This really excites Chuck. He's going to be so passionate tonight." I was at a loss for words. Was I supposed to feel good about this? Millie seemed to think so. It appeared that all three of us were enjoying our moments together, yet looking back, something felt amiss. I should have met you years ago, Millie chuckled. The more time I spend with you, the more passionate Chuck becomes. It's fantastic. I noticed how Millie differentiated her experiences with Chuck and me. It made me question myself. Was I overthinking things, searching for issues where there were none? Over the following weeks, Millie and I explored our connection in many ways. The pleasure was undeniable, but a sense of regret grew stronger after each encounter. Eventually, I identified the feeling that was gnawing at me, jealousy towards Chuck. It seemed illogical. He was supposed to be the sidelined one, yet here I was, feeling left out. After another passionate encounter, I confronted Millie, needing to know where I stood in her life. She had become significant to me, and I needed assurance. "Millie, how do you feel about me?" I asked. "We've been seeing each other for some time now. What are your thoughts?" "Oh, Paul, you're incredible," she exclaimed. "The way you make me feel is just mind-blowing." "But I mean beyond that, Millie. What are your feelings about me as a person?" I clarified. "You're a great guy, Paul. I enjoy our time together. You've got skills that leave an impression," she replied. Her response felt like a blow. It reminded me of a comedy I'd once seen, where a man was merely a plaything for others' enjoyment. It used to be funny, but now the situation hit too close to home. I wasn't in control here. I felt used, relegated to the sidelines while Millie and Chuck thrived, leaving me questioning my place in this complicated dynamic. What kind of man feels slighted after being seen only as an object by a charming woman? Maybe a man who still possesses a bit of dignity would think this way. "Have you ever considered leaving Chuck?" I inquired. "Leave Chuck? He's my partner. I adore him completely," Millie exclaimed. "Why would you suggest such a thing?" At that moment, I understood that Millie was oblivious. To her, I was merely a convenience, nothing more. Was this the plight of someone in my position, feeling unappreciated and exploited? He was certainly not a pleasant sensation. Millie, spending time with you has been quite the journey, I started. However, I can't go on like this. I'm not sure I can fully articulate my feelings, but just know that this is where our paths diverge. I'll take you home, and that will mark the end of our encounters, all right? I braced myself for an emotional outburst, a heated debate, or even accusations, anything but her actual response. Okay, Paul, you've been wonderful, and you've stuck around longer than most, she admitted. I'll inform Chuck. He'll need to devise a new plan, but he still enjoys the chase, doesn't he? As I got ready to drive Millie home, it dawned on me that she and Chuck had orchestrated such scenarios before. The irony of it all made me ponder, how does society view a man who decides to change his ways? My comment, Paul's mistake was in limiting what he would do up front. He should have expected to do whatever he wanted until he figured he was even and then stopped at that point. It would have given him a chance at anywhere from 1 to 365 days of payback.